What's up, everyone? Welcome to Living Well with JL. I am Jonathan, JL. Today's message is about how you can control your feelings. Whoa, that's controversial. You can't control how you feel. Yes, you can. Let me explain. Hear me out. So, you may have seen my other video on getting therapy. Well, if you saw that video, you know I had therapy back in 2021 and into 2022, and it was the best thing that I ever did. One of the things I learned in therapy was you can control your feelings. Here's how. Let's start with the premise that I think we can all agree on, that your feelings are created by or influenced by your thoughts. If you think positively, you'll have positive feelings. Think negatively, you'll have negative feelings. We can agree with that, right? So your feelings are derived from your thoughts. Premise number two that I think we can agree with after we talk about it, which is you can control your thoughts. You absolutely can control your thoughts. You cannot help and you cannot control what thought pops into your head, but you can control how long it's going to stay there. You absolutely can control that. So if you have a bad thought, you can evict that thought. It may come back into your head, evict it again as many times as it takes. So you can control your thoughts. If feelings are controlled by thoughts, and we can control our thoughts, then we can control our feelings. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you're out and about and some random person just walks up and calls you a disgusting, fat, ugly swine. That's a very hurtful thing to say, isn't it? Now, if you get your feelings hurt, that person did not hurt your feelings. You hurt your feelings. Here's what I mean by that. Now, initially, your initial thought is going to be, what a horrible, hurtful thing to say. As such, your initial feelings are going to be anger, sadness, negative feelings, right? That's your initial thought, therefore your initial feelings. Control your thought and that feeling changes. So, in a situation like that, here's how I would do it. And I got this from therapy, so hopefully you guys can apply this in your life. I look at it as, why would somebody say something so mean and hurtful to another person? Well, if that person is happy in his or her life, they're not going to say mean and nasty things to people. Think about it. When you're happy, do you go out of your way to be mean to people? Of course not. It's not natural. Well, if somebody just naturally says something mean or nasty, they are not happy in their life. Either they're having a bad day or they're having a bad life. Either way, I find myself choosing compassion. You know what? That person is having a horrible day or a horrible life. I'm going to pray for them. Now at this point, I'm no longer angry. I'm sad. I pity that person. The person may not want my pity, but I'm going to have that pity. I'm going to feel compassion for that person. Wow, what a horrible thing to say. Man, their life must suck. So that's how I no longer am angry or have hurt feelings when somebody says something like that. I choose to respond that way because of how I controlled my thoughts. So that is but one example. Another example, I went to get therapy because I had been in relationships where I had been done wrong. And after that, I found myself, taking it out on the next girl for the sins of the previous girl. That was in my video about therapy. Well, after I went through therapy, I wanted to break the chains, and I did. So right after I got out of therapy, I was dating a girl that did me wrong. So my initial thought, of course, was anger. I'm like, wow, you too, huh? Because I loved her, so I thought. Well, I had to change my thoughts, which changed my feelings. My thoughts became this. The person that I fell in love with never existed. She was an illusion. So I'm choosing not to be upset with falling for an illusion. Now, I could choose to be upset because she lied, but instead I'm like, no. I'm choosing not to be upset because she was an illusion. If I'm going to be upset, I should be upset with myself for falling in love with an illusion, but I'm not even upset about that. Instead, I'm choosing to look at it this way. She's doing me a favor. I now see who she is, and I am now ridding this person from my life, and I get to allow myself the opportunity to be properly loved at some point in the future. That's how I chose to think about it, which those are my thoughts. I controlled my thoughts, therefore I controlled my feelings. Now, let me be clear about this. Controlling your thoughts is not you trying to convince yourself of something that isn't true. It's you convincing yourself of something that is true. If I stood on top of a house and said, I am convinced that if I jump off this house, I can fly. That is not healthy. That is delusional. I'm trying to convince myself of something that's not true, and gravity's going to have something to say about that. So you're not convincing yourself of something that isn't true. You're convincing yourself of something that is true. And it's going to take repetition. It's not going to happen overnight. I mean, I was mad for a number of days after that. But once I got my thoughts regulated, my emotions were regulated. And let me tell you something, guys, that is a wonderful feeling to have, to be emotionally free, where you get to pick how you feel. You get to pick how you think and what you think. As long as you're not thinking anything that's delusional, and you're just reminding yourself constantly, repetitively, in a pattern, reminding yourself of what is true, you'll be just fine. You get to choose your thoughts. You get to choose your feelings. It really is that simple. So if somebody does you wrong, choose to think about it differently. Anyway, I hope that helps you guys. This is Living Well with JL. I'm taking one for the team, so you don't have to.